People online. The usual procedures, if you keep your phones on mute and your volumes on your laptops turned down so we don't get reminders pinging up all through the meeting, that'd be very helpful. So the first item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, apologies for absence received from Councillor Bill Trite and Barry Gorringe.
Thank you. And I've also been notified that Councillor David Gray will be in later. I think he's got a hospital appointment or something early on. Okay, so the second item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting on the 27th of February. And for accuracy, and you've all seen those, I don't have any points on that. Looking around the room. Nope. As far as updates, I don't know if Jonathan wanted to mention anything about the independent members and where we are as far as taking that to council. Any updates, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan Mayer, Director of Legal and Democratic. Yes, this will be an item that will go forward. The proposal to co-opt members onto this committee will go to the next full council meeting. And in the meantime, there are a number of meetings scheduled to go ahead with the independent remuneration panel so that we can be prepared if the full council agrees to the proposal.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest to declare? I have none. Nope. Take that as a no. Item 4, public participation. I can never say that word. Have we had any questions from members of the public? Susan?
No public questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Minutes of the Audit Committee, Audit and Governance subcommittees. There has been none that have met. Which takes us then nicely to item 6. This is the report of audit activity progress reports, which is from SWAP. I believe that Sally White will be kicking us off with that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is our final update for the 22-23 financial year, and there are 3 reports to present. Our update report, the annual opinion report, and approach to internal audit planning for 23-24. I will be taking members through the update report and will then hand over to my colleague Angie to take members through the annual opinion report and the planning paper. This update report is shorter than normal, as much of the information that we normally include here is contained within the annual opinion report. Areas to highlight within the report are that work continues to implement the actions for the significant risk we identified relating to premises health and safety, and a new significant risk has been identified for response to climate emergency. Starting with premises health and safety, the interim head of service property management continues to update us on progress of implementation of actions, and we will be undertaking a formal follow-up in June 2023 and hope to be able to report this work back to the committee at the July meeting. During the latter part of 2022, we undertook an audit of the Council's response to climate emergency. A summary of the findings of our work can be found on the first page of this report. We concluded our work towards the middle of January, and we've included an update on progress towards implementation of agreed actions from the Corporate Director, Transformation, Innovation, Digital and Environment. As always, we will continue to monitor implementation of agreed actions across this area and report back to the committee on a regular basis until we feel that that risk has been appropriately mitigated. I will now pass over to the Corporate Director to talk you through actions that I'm aware have been progressed over recent months since our audit work concluded.
Okay, thank you for that. My name's Steve Ford. I'm the Corporate Director for Transformation, Innovation, Digital and Environment. I was going to share a presentation, but for some reason I can't access the show. So I've just asked Susan if she can help with that, if that's okay, the joys of technology. Thank you for that. The tension was building then. I could feel the beads of sweat coming down. So thank you so much for sorting that for me. So, and thank you to Sally as well, and the work that SWAP have done as well. I think it's just going to take a few minutes just to sort of set out what's happened since this audit was undertaken, and also what the next steps are as well. I wasn't sure if Councillor Bryan wanted to say anything before I kicked off.
Councillor Bryan, yes, as the portfolio holder, I know you wanted to speak first and at the end. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm Councillor Ray Bryan, portfolio holder, highways, travel, environment, and under the environment, of course, comes climate change. Good morning, members, and any members of the public that are viewing this morning. I am very aware of the need for both internal and external audit, and will always support it. Since May 2019, a very small team have worked very hard to bring about the results we see today. This report, I don't feel, is a reflection on this work. In fact, it describes what we identified as work we needed to do, and we have identified those needs, put a plan into action midway through 2022. In my opinion, this report does not reflect this work. As I say, I'd like to come in at the end if I may, Chairman, but I'm now going to pass on to Stephen Ford to explain our path, both to where we are today and also our way forward. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I think it's just, if you just allow me just to sort for about 10 minutes or so, just talk through where we've been since the audit was concluded, because a lot has moved on in that time. And as Councillor Bryan's just pointed out, there's been a huge amount of hard work that's been going on, not only amongst the climate team, but also across Dorset Council and beyond as well. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. I think it is worth pointing out that this climate change is complicated. The environmental agenda more generally is really complicated. It's not just about a single programme of work or a single project of work. It's around behaviour change, how we travel, how we work. It impacts on all facets of Dorset Council in terms of our operations, but also how we work with partners, and also the leadership and behaviour changes that we want to see throughout Dorset as well. So there's a huge amount of work that has been undertaken, but also a huge amount of work that needs to be done as well. And I think that the Cabinet commitment to have the natural environment and climate as one of its 5 key priority areas, as agreed in the middle of last year, was a big statement of intent about how Dorset Council was going to take this agenda very, very seriously. And that's had the very positive impact of starting to realign resources across the organisation towards this agenda. So I just thought it was really important to set that context of what's happened in the last year or so. So go to the next slide, please. One of the issues that was discussed and highlighted in the audit was around governance. And again, since the audit was concluded, and actually during the audit process as well, there were significant changes to the way that the programme is being governed. 3 or 4 years ago, one of the first actions that Dorset Council did in its infancy was to obviously declare the climate and ecological emergency, and the Executive Advisory Panel, the EAP as it became commonly known, was set up to oversee that on a cross-party basis. But in the last year or so, obviously, I've been appointed, but perhaps more importantly, there's now a fully established operational group which oversees the key emitting areas of the council's operations. There's also a CLT subgroup which looks at more sort of strategic cross-service areas that we need to look at as well. But we've also, under Dorset Council's leadership, set up a public sector decarbonisation group as well, which involves health partners, fire, police, and a wide range of other organisations as well, how we can work together to drive down the emissions across Dorset as well. These were things that were picked up during the audit process, and we have reacted accordingly. And also, only last month, we had a refresh strategy, and the decision wheel was adopted as well, which is a new way of assessing the decisions Dorset Council is taking against both climate and environmental considerations as well. So all decisions that now go through committee processes will have to have a more robust form of assessment against what the climate and environmental considerations are. So big steps forward, quite fundamental, and actually putting Dorset Council, I would say, at the forefront of this work across the UK. So really important steps that have happened just in the last few months as well. So, and again, things that were highlighted in the audit. So next slide, please. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the strategy that was signed off last week has simplified the strategic intent of this programme to ensure that both officers, members and partners find it a little bit easier to understand what it is we are working towards. So ostensibly, we're looking at what can we do to combat climate change, what can we do to reverse biodiversity loss, and a new area of focus is around adaptation as well. I think that's really important that Dorset Council, again, being at the forefront of acknowledging that while we have to keep mitigating wherever possible, we do also have to consider that there are some changes that we're starting to see now in terms of the climate as well, and it's how we can build that into our thinking moving forward as well. But all of this was captured in the strategy, and lots of services fed into this as well as partners as well across Dorset. So this feels like a more rounded, and it certainly brings out the environmental focus as well, possibly more strongly than it was when we originally started out on this journey. So again, some really positive developments that have just been in the last month or so. Next slide, please. So coming on to the issue of governance, which I mentioned earlier, and which featured very strongly in the audit report, in terms of what Dorset Council is doing on its own operations, the governance now, the operational governance, is based around our key emitting areas. So that is how the operational group is now structured. That's helping tremendously because it's allowing us to get better measuring and monitoring of our progress, but more importantly, it's also enabling us to build accountability into the officers that are responsible for helping to drive some of those changes. And we are now measuring and monitoring all of those 8 key emitting areas of Dorset Council. This gets reported to the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee, but it also goes to Cabinet twice a year as well. So it's about making sure that we increase accountability, increase visibility of what we are doing, and that was one of the big challenges that was certainly thrown down in the middle of last year about how do we make sure we have transparency over the progress of what Dorset Council is doing. And there's some good progress, but undoubtedly there's a lot more work to be done as well, but things are moving in the right direction. Next slide, please. So also, one of the another area of the audit report was around our place leadership and how we could strengthen that as well. And the team working across the council has looked at this from two perspectives. One is how do we frame and shape what I call our place shaping policy approaches. So whether that's through planning or economic development or the local transport plan, there's lots of policy hooks that Dorset Council can have in terms of how it can start to affect place shaping, but also we can look at areas such as procurement as well and how we start to procure our services. But there's also a really important role, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of new types of governance. So the Dorset Public Sector Decarbonisation Group is now bringing together a more unified approach to how we look as big organisations at reducing our own carbon footprints as well. So lots and lots of work going on, working with town and parish councils as well, and as well as organisations such as the Chamber of Commerce and how they're looking at reaching out to SMEs as well. So huge amounts of work that have gone on, and again, making sure that we pick that up as a focus area, and that's been going on for the last year or so. So next slide, please. So if we just skip over that one, if that's okay. It's just a fancy graphic. So I thought that it was also really important just to set out. So that's some of the sort of the direct response to some of the findings of the audit, and what we've done to work towards meeting some of those challenges. Some of those are already in train. Some of those we were keen to show progress on. But also just to sort of highlight the huge amount of work that has been going on, and a lot of this has come to fruition during the last few months as well. I won't go through all of these particular projects, but when you start to add up the public sector decarbonisation programme, the low carbon Dorset programme, and lots of other large scale projects that we're working on to decarbonise both Dorset Council assets, but also working with partners as well. It conservatively is a £50 million plus programme, but actually it's a lot larger than that because there's other resources that are being put into this from services as well. Some of that's quite difficult to account for in terms of time and everything else, but you just look at the scale of what we've been doing, and it has been quite phenomenal, really. Next slide, please. Again, these are just a selection of what Dorset Council is doing, both in terms of its own estate, but also how we are looking to have a major impact on the public access to areas such as EV infrastructure as well. A huge commitment and a big area where, although I know that again the audit report talked about sort of limited resources and the challenges of trying to deliver a programme of this scale, but actually what we've worked really hard on, I know that Councillor Brian has been really keen on this, is that we are accessing external resources wherever possible, and actually it's amplifying the impact of what we are doing, both as a council but also as a systems leader as well. So these are just some examples of that. Next slide, please. And again, just these are just a little bit of boasting here in terms of where we are on recycling and stuff. But I think it's a good thing to just keep exemplifying the fact that Dorset Council in many areas is doing exceptional work, and it's nationally recognised. And we're certainly starting to get a lot more local authority interest in what we are doing on the climate and environmental side as well. So again, just sort of some really positive stats and feedback as well. Next slide, please. One area that I mentioned earlier, and again, I know that the audit report talks about the potential need for sort of offsetting and how we could look at that. The strategy that was signed off last month at Cabinet has a far more prominent role for the environment and biodiversity. It was mentioned in the first strategy, but it's strengthened significantly now. And we're starting to bring in measuring and metrics about how we can actually start to measure how we are doing on biodiversity loss. That'll be on Dorset Council's own assets, but actually it's a much bigger systems leadership piece across Dorset as well. We are working with the likes of the AONB, but also Dorset Wildlife Trust and many others as well, about how we can start to deliver nature recovery across Dorset. And we're now also the accountable body for the local nature recovery strategy as well, which is going to be a a statutory obligation on us to start to deliver more biodiversity across Dorset as well. And that's something, as I said, that we are starting to see some real success on. This is just a small example of some of those projects as well. So, and there is a real potential for offsetting, as evidenced in the Audit Committee report as well, which we're looking into. Next slide, please. And finally, as I mentioned before, we have now got a more focused approach to adaptation and resilience as well. A lot of this is work that's already underway, but what we're very keen to do over the next year is start to build a more of a partnership approach to how we look at resilience across the piece with the likes of the Environment Agency, Natural England, and many others as well. And I think this will be a growing area of focus for the programme. Okay, next slide, please. So almost there, in case you're wondering. But in direct response again to the findings of the audit report, there's a series of steps that you can see that we are really keen to undertake. We feel that we've already responded to a lot of what was in the audit report, but undoubtedly there are still areas that we need to work hard on, and certainly areas such as how we measure and monitor our Scope 3 emissions is something that we are actively focusing on now, but I wouldn't, for 1 minute say that we've cracked that yet. But we're not alone in that. Almost every local authority is struggling in the area of Scope 3 because it is just so vast and wide as well. So there's still work to do, but there's a huge amount that we've done already. Next slide, please. So in terms of, that was some of the stuff we're doing on our operational footprint. In terms of how we're working with others on the facilitation side, again, you can see it there, and I've mentioned some of it already. It's looking at our policies. It's looking at how we strengthen those sort of pan-Dorset partnerships as well. We've got rolling meetings now with the town and parish councils as well, especially those that have already declared, but others as well. And it's how do we start to create that critical mass through that systems leadership to make sure we're driving this agenda forward. Because it can't just be Dorset Council; it has to be wider than that. So apologies, that was more than 10 minutes, but a programme of this scale and size, and obviously making sure that we, as to the best of our abilities, we covered off some of the issues that were raised by the SWAP team. We thought it was important just to give us a comprehensive response as possible to some of those issues that were raised. So that's all for me. So thank you for listening.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that comprehensive display. I don't know if Councillor Bryan, you want to come back before we open it to members.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Couple of items I would like to add is obviously we're not just looking at Dorset Council's position, we're also looking at the wider picture across Dorset Council's area. And I'd like to just pick up on the fact that we're using a lot of BEIS data to monitor what's happening in the county area. And I think that's important because it shows that not only are we looking after Dorset Council's position, but also the county's position. And one of the most important things that will come out of all of this, hopefully, is that the residents will realise just how hard this council is working, how much they've achieved, and continue to support us. Because without the residents' support, it's always going to be a struggle to get to the 2050 date. I'd also like to just point out the fact that Stephen was appointed in May last year. He was actually appointed well before that, but unfortunately, because of his position, he had to serve notice as his previous council. But he was appointed because we identified as a council the need to bring in knowledge, expertise, and quality. That doesn't in any way mean that we hadn't already got good expertise and good quality with the existing officers, but we needed somebody that could lead on this. So Stephen was appointed. Since then, Stephen has led the team to some superb results. We highlighted on there the 19 million that we got from government. That was a fantastic achievement, but what was a bigger achievement was actually delivering it in the very tight time scale that the government actually gave us. We had to seek 2 extensions, but if I tell you that we succeeded in spending nearly every penny of it, whereas I know that other councils had failed, but it just shows how well the officer team performed on the jobs they were given. Right from word go, I made it very clear that it would be very much a last resort if we started purchasing carbon credits. It's no secret that all councils are under pressure on money. And for members of the public who may not understand what that means, it does mean that if we wanted to, we could go and buy a piece of land, either in this country or another country, and as long as it had reduction in carbon emissions, that would go down as our credit. That to me is not the way to deal with this. We need to deal with it on our own land, in our own area, which is why I've pushed carbon credits to the absolute end. And I'm sure Aidan and the leader who sat in front of me will be pleased to hear that that will be a last resort. We will try everything we can before we have to reach that stage. I'd also like to mention the EAP, because the Executive Advisory Panel, bearing in mind we declared an emergency for climate in the first full council meeting that this unitary had. We then added the ecological side a few months later. But I think it's very important that everybody understands this was cross-party work, and I got a fair bit of pressure to bring the 2040 date forward. We talked about 2035, we talked about 2030, we talked about 2025. 2040 was chosen as the date we felt we could achieve. Now, I have no reason to think that won't be the case, because this is what's under our control. And as Stephen has highlighted, we've already seen a lot of actions taking place. I have responsibility under my travel portfolio for the fleet. We're transferring a lot of the fleet onto electric vehicles. And if you go out into County Hall, you'll see 1 or 2 of them around, hopefully not too many, because they're supposed to be out working. But we have come a long, long way. And I go back to the 2040 date. The report says that that is a major concern. It is a concern, but I do believe we did the right thing in going for a long stop date rather than a short stop date, because had we gone for the short stop date, the only way we could achieve it would be to buy carbon credits. But that doesn't solve the problem in Dorset. And that's what, whilst I'm still here, breathing, and believe me, this has taken over part of my life, I'm passionate about this. I make no apologies whatsoever. I do believe we've done a lot that is right. I'm going to stop there, because I'm sure there's lots of other people that will want to either say things or ask questions. So thank you for sparing me that time, Chairman.
No, thank you very much. It's good to hear your robust defence. I understand the Leader of Council, Spencer Flower, wishes to come back.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I'd like to add on to what Ray's already said and endorse what he said. I think he's explained it very well. One of the things he talked about was the £19 million of SELEX funding we got from central government, which is a huge opportunity for us to invest in some of the ways in which we've gone about reducing our carbon footprint. What he didn't mention is the extra £10 million over 2 years that this council's added in to the programme, the capital programme. So it's it demonstrates our commitment to the climate and ecological strategy that we've signed up for. We've got an action plan and so on. But the one key aspect and this applies to every council in the country, the key aspect of any council achieving the climate levels of reductions in carbon has to rely on central government funding. The sector doesn't have the funding capacity to deliver what needs to be delivered. I think the last count that I remember, I've got a figure of 130 million in my head. It may have gone up since, because it's probably 2 years old now, but it's that sort of magnitude, that sort of number that we're going to have to rely on to enable us to achieve all the things we want to achieve on the ground. There's no issue in this council across the chamber about us wanting to achieve what we said we want to achieve around the climate emergency. So I'm really comfortable with that. I'm very grateful for Stephen's contribution, Chairman, and you allowed him to do that this morning. So that was very helpful, because it's a bit of an antidote to what I've read in the report. Now, I accept the report's a snapshot at a given time, but I might just query, and this is not for necessarily an answer for this meeting, is to who was spoken to by the auditors around this, because the sort of stuff that Stephen's talking about, some of it will have been created in the last month or so. Some of it would have been the thinking of going forward and how we ensure that we do stay on track and we do get the governance, to fine-tune the governance to meet the aspirations we've got. We talk about ourselves being a bold and ambitious council, and that's what we are. And I think we've demonstrated that in a huge way around what we're trying to deliver as far as the climate emergency is concerned. And I'm sorry to say this, Chairman, but I will say this in public. I was slightly disappointed by what I read, a significant risk. Now, I would like to understand beyond this meeting what the significant risk is, because I've been involved in risk management in my days when I was in work, doing a big job in industry. So I understand what risk's about, but I'd like to better understanding about what risk means to this council in the context of the climate and ecological emergency. And I'm not sure that what I read in the audit report necessarily demonstrates that, certainly to my satisfaction. If it's leaving me in doubt, I wonder how many people of the public who read it may also be in doubt. And I think having that presentation this morning was hugely helpful, because it helped to demonstrate just how committed this council is to the climate and ecological emergency. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak this morning.
Thank you very much, Leader of Council. I think it's fair to say that this committee places a lot of importance on the work of SWAP, our internal auditors, that independent look within our services, and often it is very complementary in many areas. And when it does find issues, generally they are welcomed as to being taken on board. So I think there needs perhaps a little bit of focus. I've heard what has been said, but I think the tone of the report is certainly not understating the work and the huge work that's been done with a very small team and what's been done, and it was a snapshot at that time. But it is focusing on that confidence or lack of confidence of reaching that 2040 target. Now, I appreciate it's an opinion and you can have several opinions, but we do rely on auditors to look, to lift, as I call it, lift the drains up and ask those difficult questions. And it may not be always comfortable, but that's fine. That's what this committee, is around, and particularly around the governance area, which, from the sounds of it, has been considerably strengthened since that audit was done, which is good. But I'm looking at sort of the areas, long-standing issues, limitations on the data provided by services to calculate the council's carbon footprint. So, we can do all these good works, we can spend money, but if we can't understand that data, we can't measure it, that's what I challenge. Now, I'm sure the officers and Steve Ford would say that, we're on target with that, but, it is a huge, ambitious target that I appreciate that all councils are facing. But I'm going to leave it there because I've probably spoken too much. Councillor Christopher, you've got your hand up.
I listened to previous speakers with interest, not least the Leader of the Council who sat by my side. we clearly don't live in isolation. There are other large organisations that exist very close by, not least of which is Dorset County Hospital. And when you walk through the corridors of Dorset County Hospital, there are enormous boards talking about the environmental impact of the hospital. And I understand that 17% of the carbon footprint associated with Dorset County Hospital is associated with travel. And clearly that will weigh on people's minds when we come to discuss the local plan and where houses might be built. But I'll park that one to one side for a minute and then start talk about all the other good work that's going on. And I can take you up and down the railway line, if you like, all the wonderful work at Weymouth Station, or indeed the disabled access at Dorchester West, or indeed the cycleway, the trailway up at Maiden Newton. All these wonderful things that are happening due to people's great efforts. But on occasions, I think it's very good to actually come back to the heart of the county, to the county town, and consider all those listed buildings and consider them in the context of energy performance certificates. Now, some of you will be aware that the rules around energy performance certificates and listed buildings, or indeed commercial buildings in their entirety, changed on the 1st of April. And that will be a key factor, I feel, because there are many listed buildings, many commercial buildings very close to here, where, of course, there are exemptions outside of the changed EPC rules. The EPC rules now apply to all tenancies, not just new commercial tenancies. So clearly the government has a great environmental focus, and we do. We're in the party that I represent. But there are more challenges. There are clearly more challenges, and there are great challenges not just within urban areas. And I'm going to close in a second, because we saw mention of the rollout of charging points for vehicles, but there is a great concern for people who live in rural areas, people who live off-grid, and indeed people who ponder how they will ever afford an electric vehicle. So there are great concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pipe next, and Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Chairman. In the preamble to this report, which I thank you very much for, it mentions that town and parish councils are those who have declared. By that, am I to understand that they declared a climate emergency? Yeah, okay. So, what encouragement is being given to other parish and town councils who have not declared a climate emergency? And how do we encourage them to fall behind those that have declared and to join in with the various initiatives that have been brought forward thus far? Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Ford, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, I can try at least. We've been out and met with. We've been to events organised by the Dorset Association of Parish and Town Councils. There's been 2 events. One was with clerks and one was with councillors. And we've presented on what we've been doing as a council, but also on the importance of how we can work with town and parish councils across the piece. We've completely rejigged our website as well, and there's now a town and parish council section to that as well, which has a series of tools and guidance and signposting as well. A lot of that has been based around what town and parish councils have been telling us that they were interested in as well. And we're also providing advice and guidance on things like sort of environmental policies as well that town and parish councils are trying to pull together as well. So we are doing what we can within the confines of a relatively small team to try and encourage all town and parish councils to accelerate the action that they're taking. But what I would say is that there are a significant number that have declared a climate or environmental either emergency or commitment as well. And there's a huge amount of learning for us as well about what some of those town and parish councils are doing as well.
Thank you for that. Just a quick add on there, Chairman. Do you find any reluctance in parish and town councils to roll out the measures, particularly those who have declared a climate emergency? Do you find it? I mean, do you find a reluctance for them to actually get on and do the stuff?
I think my overriding impression is there's a little bit of frustration about what are the right things to do. That's sort of my overriding impression from speaking to a large number of town and parish councils. It can be quite confusing, and I think there's quite a lot of voices out there about what that town and parish councils are having to listen to and disaggregate, sort of what's the best thing to do. So yes, there's some reluctance potentially, but I think my overriding, as I said, impression is it's not really understanding what are the next best steps, because you're talking about, such a wide range of capacity and capability, whether you're going from sort of a large town council through to a much smaller parish as well. That's been my overwhelming impression, is the confusion about what the next best steps are.
Councillor Borden.
Thank you, Chairman. I was reading this somewhat in dismay. As you know, I was only elected last year, and the change in that last year in Dorset Council's way of thinking about the climate emergency, because this is why I got into politics. This is why I am equally passionate as Councillor Bryan that this is the most important. It's the most important issue of our lifetime, and I'm really proud of the progress that Dorset Council has made. I think it was about 3 years ago now I co-founded the Dorset Climate Action Network, and we was trying to form a kind of umbrella network of local sort of environmental and climate action groups to share best practice and to sort of learn from each other and hopefully work with Dorset Council and the town and parish councils. And obviously we work closely with Zero Carbon Dorset and all of the other established groups, Sustainable Dorset. I think one of the things, apart from, I'm grateful that we've had the update this morning as well, which addresses quite a few of the issues. And picking up on Councillor Pipe's question about town and parish councils, I do think there is still a bit of an issue there, and I recognise that DOPTC is doing fantastic work in communicating much more effectively. Doesn't always reach all of the councillors, whether that's through the clerks not necessarily passing things on, or there are just one or two councillors who may be involved in DOPTC. As far as I know, my fellow councillors don't ever read the DOPTC newsletter. I don't even know if they get it. They don't like listening to me because... so I think there is still a bit of an issue. For example, picking up on Councillor Bryan's tremendous ability to have spent the SALEX money, I managed to get national lottery money for the what do they call it? Together for Our Planet funding for a project in Lyme Regis and Charmouth and the surrounding area to look at what does net zero mean in 2030? What are the things we need to focus on? What capacity do we have locally? And I don't think I've been able to spend it all within the deadline because we're so dependent on volunteers doing this stuff. And that really is the problem because we're spread so thinly across, you know, the work on the river action groups, for example, has been absolutely fantastic. And there's amazing partnership working with Dorset AONA I can never say that, AONB, and Dorset Wildlife Trust in Councillor Christopher's constituency in Char Valley, which obviously overlaps with Charmouth. And in Lyme Regis, we're working really closely with the Environment Agency and South West Water and achieving absolutely fantastic results with Dorset Council and the Town Council. But an awful lot of us are volunteers, and I think there's a danger of a lot of the groups that are going on. We're trying so hard not to reinvent the wheel, but we don't necessarily feel that we're being listened to and being, I don't know, that it's all being joined up. So we appreciate the Dorset Council operations and the expertise and everything that you've gained, but it's that next step of helping translate that into local action that we can, and I definitely take Councillor Flower's point about government funding. Yes, we need government funding, but I think there's still a job of work to do with joining up what is already going on and how we can replicate that and support the town and parish councils in showing that this is possible. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pike, you wish to come back briefly, I hope?
It's actually a new point, Chairman. Not coming back at all. Right. There's a 50 million programme of work. Government money, council money, not forgetting Councillor Flower's 10 million, and private money. Where does the private money come from?
Well, it's a fair point, but I know that there is private money around for various schemes. I mean, I think that the key thing is to focus on what we got in front of us. You know, we can talk about all these, I think we've gone off a bit, you know, all interesting points, but we've got an audit report highlighting some governance issues and some data issues that need to be addressed. I think there's differing views about the level at which that is and the speed at which it is. But I think it's something that we're going to have to keep, you know, we've got the report, it is noted, there's clearly different opinions, but I think it's right to have that. Sometimes a cold bit of a reality, you know, it's a bit painful sometimes, but that's no bad thing, and it's part of our process that we do here. Councillor Christopher.
With respect, the Dorset Council member for Lyme Regis mentions many things, including the River Char. The government's Rural Prosperity Fund makes available £110 million to assist farmers in connection with compliance with silage and slurry requirements and control. And clearly there are capital allowances aspects where the expenditure net of the grant can be offset against profit. So clearly the government is taking substantial action on this field. There are other points that I could talk about, but clearly there is a large impact on West Dorset post-COVID through the sheer number of visitors that actually come into the countryside. And clearly there are large numbers of campsites, etc., which do have an impact, and clearly good responsible farmers feel that they're being attacked all the time, and they're not the only traders who are in point on this issue. But clearly some Dorset councillors really do get it, and I do sympathise with the member for Lyme Regis and Charmouth, because with one of her councils, I think really the local parish council or the town councils spend most of their time practising their resignation letters, whilst the rest of us just get on with it and do things properly and engage with local residents and local businesses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I am going to wrap it up at that point. I think it is mentioned quite rightly that scrutiny do review the work of reaching this target twice a year, and that's where much of the work will be done. We've viewed the governance arrangement and the changes, so we look forward to them assisting that deliverance. Final word to yourself, Ray.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you allowing me to come in. I would like, if possible, for a better understanding on the terminology risk on this report, because I think it's very, Spencer's already raised this, but I would like it to be noted that I would like to see something come back as to what this risk actually is, because we're still a long way away from our target date of 2040. We know what we've achieved. We have plans to achieve even more. So I just want to get a better understanding, if I can, from the audit team on what they see is the actual risks. Because I think until we identify what these risks are, we can't do much about them, because I'm confused by that word. I understand the word risk, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure where the risk is on what we're doing so far. I take on board your comment over the governance, and we've taken strong steps. But again, I'd like to highlight that during the start of this climate emergency, we've also had a pandemic in the middle, which hasn't allowed a lot of slack anywhere. And again, I just want to make sure that none of the officers take this as criticism. If it is, it's constructive criticism. And I think that's what I'd like to see go forward. But I would like to see or have a better understanding of how they calculate their risk factors, because they're saying great risk. So I really do need to understand that. Thank you, Chairman.
Sally White, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of the risk that we've identified, it's the potential risk of the council failing to reach its net zero target by 2040. And that is around the fact that at the time of our audit, there was some concerns around data, and without having that data in place and being able to fully calculate the impact, it's not possible to be confident that the council will achieve its net zero by 2040.
And that would be my understanding of it too. When I read it, I wasn't particularly confused by that. As an exhibition, I was going to say that there was no confusion to me as what the risk was. I thought it was quite clear in the report, but there we are. Okay, I think we'll move on from there. I think that we've had a good discussion around that debate, and no doubt it will come back. And the progress, as always, is reported back to us on any of these limited assurance issues. Okay. So next item on the agenda, do you wish to go to discuss on item 8?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Angie, who will take you through the...
Thank you, Sally. I'm Angie Hooper, Principal Auditor, SWAP Internal Audit Services. Highlights from the annual opinion report. We are giving reasonable assurance, we're providing reasonable internal audit opinion. At least some work has been undertaken across each of the Council's corporate risk themes. 8 limited assurance opinions issued, with 2 of these identified as a significant risk. Process of continuous follow-up of agreed audit actions continues to substantially reduce the numbers of outstanding overdue actions. The annual report supports the Council's annual governance statement. We've considered the balance of the 2022-23 audit work and are able to offer a reasonable assurance opinion in respect of the areas reviewed during the year, as most were found to be adequately controlled and risks generally well managed. However, while some areas require the introduction or improvement of internal controls, the robust approach to implementation of audit actions has been part of the consideration in forming this opinion. During the year, 2 significant corporate risks have been reported to the committee, which has just been referred to in the update report. Appropriate actions have been planned in all instances, and we continue to monitor the mitigation of these risks. There have been an additional 6 limited assurance opinions during the year. The table on page 21 of the agenda pack of our audit coverage through the year, mapped against the Council's corporate risk themes, demonstrates that we have provided some level of audit work across all of the corporate risk themes during the year. The process of continuous follow-up of agreed actions continues to substantially reduce the numbers of outstanding overdue actions. We have had valuable support from the senior leadership team in the Council in this, which has been key. The number of overdue priority 1 and 2 actions has reduced significantly from 34 in June 2022 to 10 as of today. In addition, for the second year in succession, there were no audit actions that were risk accepted during 2022 to 23, and we believe that our adoption of our collaborative and inclusive agile approach has played some part in this. A schedule of the full programme of our work in 22-23 is provided on pages 28 to 34 of your agenda pack. We're happy to take any questions about the annual opinion report. Thank you.
I'm looking around the room to see if there's any questions from members. I'm content. Councillor Gray.
Question really. Audit resources. Are we happy that there's been a 25% reduction in the number of audit days in the last 2 years? Whilst there's no further reductions, I'm wondering what the reason was for the 25% reduction.
Point. Sally, are you able to, or Angie?
Chairman, would you like me to help with that? When we came together as Dorset Council, now that was 4 years ago, we brought together the audit hours of all of the predecessor councils, and we have gradually brought those audit hours down to a level that Aidan Dunn, I think, is an acceptable level for an authority of this size, reflecting that cumulatively the audit hours of the predecessor councils were too great for a unitary council. And we've done that over a series of years, not all in one hit. And that's why we've got to this 25% reduction.
Thank you. Does that help you, Councillor Gray?
I was looking for Swap's opinion.
No, absolutely, that's fine. The reason I paused before answering was actually the question is concerning the internal audit planning paper rather than our internal audit opinion, but happy to answer at this stage, don't worry. As Jonathan Mayer has pointed out, the reduction has been over a number of years. This has allowed us to sort of plan resources around that. And I feel that currently the number of, the audit budget and the number of days that we have is sufficient to allow us to provide an annual opinion to the council.
Councillor Gray is nodding. So I think there's been good progress and catching up with the outstanding works. I think it's something that's really appreciated by the committee because it is it's how we deal with outstanding actions. We'll get the results that we want. So I think that's good because we did have too many a while back. So we're now actually onto the approach to internal audit planning. Please, any comment?
Thank you, Chair. We are continuing with our flexible approach to audit planning, driven by our continuous risk assessment that we regularly review with each directorate. This risk assessment is based on the Council's strategic and service risk registers and performance management data overlaid with SWAP's top 10 risk areas and our healthy organisation framework. The result is our rolling audit plan, which you can view on the Audit Teams channel following the link in the report. The Institute of Internal Auditors is planning to change our professional framework, currently known as the International Professional Practices Framework. The internal audit charter that guides our internal audit work is based around this framework, and as such, we will be reviewing the charter as further information becomes available in due course. In the meantime, we will continue to operate in accordance with our existing charter. Thank you. And obviously, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Apologise, there's a lot of drilling going on, so may have affected your hearing on that one, but I think we caught all that. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. No, I think, Councillor Christopher.
Just to come back on previous points, having been an external auditor myself, the three obvious aspects of actually undertaking audit work are planning, controlling and recording the work. And clearly with LGR, it was always the intention that the whole level of materiality would change. And I do get the point that there are clear savings to be made in terms of time spent on audit as the organisations come together. And clearly, one would hope that would continue as the items on the fixed asset register, etc., diminish, and where we have perhaps less assets and assets that may be going to be sold off that aren't being used, then that work would diminish, and that would assist with the amount of time spent on audit as we achieve the objectives that were set out in the case for LGR. And clearly the level of materiality is that much higher within a larger organisation than within 9 previous councils.
I don't know if Swat wished to comment on that. It seems like more external audit to me, but...
Absolutely, that would be my point, that we are internal audit rather than external audit, and external audit work to materiality and are obviously concerned around assets. We are more concerned around risk and risk to the organisation.
Okay, I'm going to take you forward next. Thank you very much, Swat, for that. So we've had a really good discussion on that wider point. To item 9, which is the annual government statement. This is a statutory document that we do, funnily enough, every year. But it is, I think, it's a challenging thing. I mean, I've spent a bit of time going back and forwards with officers trying to make it as sort of simplified as possible. And there's various... we've looked at how other councils are doing that, always trying to make it, get them enough information in there, but make it some sort of an easy read. And I think I've been somewhat defeated, really, because it is, I think you have a certain level of detail you do have to put in there to make sense of it. But I think it's something that we will work on. Mark Eyre, I think you're going to lead on this, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Mark Eyre and I'm the Service Manager for Assurance. So the draft statutory annual governance statement always comes to the committee at this time of year, and that's really to give members the opportunity to comment on its contents before it's signed off by the leader and the Chief Executive, and then goes on to accompany the annual accounts. So just for a bit of background, the statement's aligned to 7 principles that are defined by SIPFA and SOLACE. The evidence base for the annual governance statement is contained within the Local Code of Corporate Governance, and that's included at Appendix A to the statement. And that looks to map out our policies, our processes, our procedures, and other governance arrangements against those SIPFA SOLACE principles. Where we identify any perceived gaps or there are proposed improvements, these are then identified and reflected in the annual governance statement improvement plan. So this time around, there are 7 improvements identified. That's ongoing work to improve subject access request compliance, further embedding of risk management, rolling out the data strategy, embedding data protection impact assessments, developing the information asset register, rollout of the climate change risk assessment, and improving compliance rates on mandatory training. At Appendix B, there's also reference to the most significant risks that have been identified within our corporate and service risk register framework. So that's in terms of the report itself. Chair, if I could, just one final point before opening it up to questions. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank my colleague David Trotter, who sat behind me now, for his work on this statement, and more generally for the work he's done in driving forward our risk management arrangements. David's going to be shortly leaving the council, and this will be his last attendance at this committee. So I think members will be aware of the contributions that he's made over the years, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank him for that. Thank you.
And I would certainly echo that. And I've worked with David on a number of issues, and he's certainly put a huge amount of work into the annual government statement and into risk management, particularly in the early days, and getting us up into really good space. And so really appreciated David, and sorry to see you go. Do I have any questions on the statement? Stunned everyone into silence, I think, which I guess is a good thing because I think it's straightforward. Oh, Councillor Christopher, you're back.
Just to make a point about risk, clearly if there are any people listening to this, they should be bearing in mind that this Dorset Council, led by the Conservatives, has done an awful lot to actually try and use assets constructively, and it's other parties that have acted negatively during the last 4 years, particularly around the former offices of West Weymouth Council.
We don't bring politics into this. We try and be independent and objective. That's probably something you could make on scrutiny, but not on this committee, please. But noted, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay. So we note that and accept that. Thank you very much for all the hard work that's gone into that. We now move on to item 8, which is the approach to value for money, which I believe, item 10. Yeah. Dr. David Bonner is going to take us through that one, please. And I understand Jill Haynes may be online. She's the portfolio holder. She's, I can't see. You're just a little postage stamp to me. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we'll get you to comment.
I'm here.
Morning, Jill. Okay.
Let's let David do his presentation, and then perhaps I'll make a few comments afterwards, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, committee. We also have our head of ICT on the line who will be commenting on the findings from the recent VFM study. So really the purpose today is to provide committee with an update on where we've got to with understanding and evolving our approach to value for money assessment at the Council. The report in front of you outlines where we've got to with that and details of a pilot study that we've done with our ICT operations colleagues. We've identified that study, we've learned a lot from that study. It's helped us understand that actually our approach has evolved quite considerably since the inception of Dorset Council and since the original paper was brought to this committee. Over that time frame, we have built out our performance management framework and evolved that significantly. We've also changed the way that we use our business partners and evolved that model, so there's far more challenge within the organisation from a central perspective around performance. And the paper really just outlines the original proposed model for value for money assessment, looking at the 4 E's of economy, efficiency, effectiveness and equity, is potentially significantly resource intensive. The pilot study was useful for ICT operations, and the report does outline a number of positive findings in relation to that particular service area. However, it was only really made possible because of SOCOTM and the ability to survey and then benchmark specifically in that particular field. So in summary, the paper outlines that really we need to start evolving our performance framework to include much greater levels of benchmarking and to build in the value for money assessment into our existing framework. We have a new data and business intelligence strategy which was signed off in February this year, and that will help us turn the dial in terms of things like business intelligence and using the data that we have across this organisation, bringing it together around things that will support our assessment of economy, efficiency, effectiveness and equity. Now, the significant advantage of that approach is that rather than having deep dives on sort of a one-off basis looking at service areas, it will allow for a continuous assessment of our value for money position against the performance framework. So I think there are significant advantages to doing it this way as opposed to the previous way. It also allows us to include things like risk into that process. So I will pause there and hand over to my colleague in ICT, James Aylward, Head of ICT Operations, for whose service area we did the pilot value for money assessment. As I said at the outset, the results were very good for ICT operations. I think, James, it's fair to say, however, it was resource intensive from my side in terms of my service, and indeed also from your side in terms of your service. So I will pause there and pass over to James.
Thank you, David. Yes, I would agree with that. It was resource intensive on both parties, and the process that we went through was really quite tailored in the end to technology services. So the Society of Innovation, Technology and Modernisation, which is SOCOTIM, provide a benchmarking service which we took advantage of, and that provided most of the inputs to the value for money assessment that we concluded. That was looking at the 2021-22 financial year, and then the customer survey that we did with SOCOTIM looked at a snapshot of customer feedback in the summer of 2022, so summer last year. We had a really positive and strong response from that, something in the region of 39% of IT users responded to that survey, so really a valid set of customer feedback and perceptions on the service that they're getting. We also looked at recent swap audits into disaster recovery, incident management and the council's IT network, all of which received substantial assurance as their rating, and we fed in the recent Cyber 360 review conducted by the LGA, which identified a strong cyber culture and a very good general cyber practice at Dorset Council. So as David says, overall, the review, I think, demonstrated some real strengths for the operational service. So it showed that we have low revenue spend. We were first quartile for the level of revenue spend against our benchmark peers. We have average overall spend, which includes capital spend, excellent service availability, strong networking capability given our rural geography, a rationalised, well-managed IT estate, and strong performance in responding quickly to resolving issues that our users face. And the customer survey demonstrated generally good feedback, with data showing that DC IT operations is meeting user expectations more effectively than our peers in the benchmark survey. There are, of course, some areas for further consideration and improvement, and a particular note, I think, was the difference in view between general IT users and strategic management regarding their satisfaction level. So strategic managers were significantly less satisfied with the support that they received from the technology function, and I guess to a degree extending that out to the services that we collaborate with to deliver change in supporting business change and transformation. So I think that's an area that needs some further consideration to ensure that we're able to support the functions to change and meet our transformation aspirations over time. So I'll hand back to you, David, or perhaps to Councillor Haynes for comment.
Thank you, James. That's a helpful summary of the findings of the report. So as I said, the crux of this paper really is to recommend to the committee that we enhance our existing performance framework to incorporate value for money metrics within that as an ongoing assessment of how we are doing in terms of value for money, and then that we use our internal business partners to ensure robust challenge, as indeed they do as part of the current monthly performance process, to ensure that we challenge that. I mean, that is the recommendation of this paper, and I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Haynes, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Chairman. I really think that this is actually a very valuable process that we've been through here with ICT, just to show how far we've come from what we were like at the beginning of this council period, because we are now using all of that performance detail, and the dashboards that we have are really showing us the data that we need to make our business decisions. And I think that as opposed to it just being value for money now, as David has said, not only are we going to be looking at value for money, but we're going to be looking at risk and the outcomes that that spend has provided. And that's the bit that's really important, because that's the bit that's facing people. So value for money has to include those outcomes as well, or we are not doing the job that we here are elected to do. So I think this is a really excellent piece of work. I think congratulations to James and his team are due, because they really are providing a very good service for the council. I hear what he says about strategic managers, and yes, somehow we do need to kind of up our game a little bit in that area. But for the most part, these are really, really good results, and congratulations to the team. And also for David, for the way that this is likely to come back to you in future. I really hope the committee appreciate how much more information you're going to be able to get by working in this way. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haynes. Councillor Pipe and Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman. I wholly endorse the report, its findings and its recommendations. And one thing I would say, that where Dorset Council is concerned, value for money is Dr. Bonner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Fully support this. I think 2019 I first mentioned value for money, and I'm very pleased to see it's coming to fruition. So congratulations to everybody involved, and particularly ICT. Bit of an easy one to start with, because we all know that they give good service. So not surprised there. One cautionary tale and one sort of challenge, really. On page 90.4, agree the business partner model. I mean, I support the business partner model as a way of driving efficiency. One of the downsides of a business partner model is that it does sometimes, and I say sometimes, drive a sort of silo management in terms of cost. And I've been a victim of that several times in the last year, where different departments are arguing about who's going to pay for something, and business partners drive that. So just a cautionary tale about value for money, which brings me to my final point, which is point 6. It's the only point in those in the recommendation that really is about behaviour. And I'd like to see some more emphasis on this, because whilst we can put structures and measurement and processes in place, at the end of the day, it's the link between value for money and consulting with our customers or our residents and suppliers, where when the rubber hits the road, that is the point where we will get value for money. It has to be right at the very end of the process. And I don't feel that that point is highlighted enough, that it's behavioural change in the organisation that we need that drives value for money, as if those people, those business partners, were spending their own money, because there's plenty of examples of this council wasting money in the last 4 years, which I won't go into now. But I think this is a great process, but I think behaviourally we need to get right down to the people that actually spend the budgets and consult with our customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Some really good points there. And I think that's one of the hardest things to change is behavioural change. You can have all the policies that you want, but if people just pay lip service to it, you're not going to get the change that you want. But then that's an ongoing challenge. Really good work that I think was done around ICT, and that's really useful. I suppose the bit I always passionate about myself is benchmarking with other councils, and it's still proving a difficult nut to crack because everyone does it a little bit differently. But I'd love to be able to press a button and you say, we spend X per square metre on our buildings. This compares with Cornwall, this compares, but I guess that's the holy grail, and we're never going to quite get there. But we're sort of moving across, and I guess all other councils are in a similar boat, so pick up best practice. But some really good work there. Assuming you're all happy with I'm not seeing any disagreements with the 7 points there. So thank you very much. So that moves us on to item 11, which is our external auditors in-house. I believe you're sitting there waiting to give an update for us, please.
Morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee. Yeah, it's the in-house partner from Deloitte, the external auditors. We continue to progress with the audit. We were hoping that we would complete by this committee, as you will be aware from the minutes of last time. We are now very, very close. We're waiting a final version of the amended accounts from the council, which is nearly with us. The council has re-advertised the availability of the accounts for inspection just due to a very minor technical issue with the first issue of that, so people are able to look at those accounts again as soon as that process is complete and we receive the draft accounts. We'll be able to produce a final ISA 260, which is our report on our findings for you, and bring this to a final and well overdue conclusion. So unfortunately, I had hoped we would come today with a final conclusion, and we've not quite got there. It was very close, but didn't quite make the paper deadline for that. But it is now in the very final stages and should be signed either at the next committee, or if we were able to do it between committees, then that is also a possibility, I believe.
Thank you very much for that update. And I think it is, as we all said, a little bit frustrating. It's taking so much time. But we do look forward to that conclusion when it arrives as soon as possible, please. Are there any questions for Mr. House from members? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to the final item on the agenda, which is 12, which is the work programme. I think that's all self-explanatory. If there's any questions on that or any items that may go in further, now is your chance. Nope. Okay. That is the, we've got no confidential business, have we? No. No other urgent business, have we? No. Okay. That concludes the meeting then. Thank you very much for your attendance and for your input. Thank you very much.